Deputy Shane Ross. You're shared, so you're going first,
I'll go
Maureen.
first, yeah.
Deputy Maureen O'Sullivan.
Thank
10
you.
minutes, Maureen.
Pardon?
10 minutes.
10 minutes, yes.
Yes.
Go Margaret. Tom Buick will chance come large fay Villa Argadish. Agus Kinta will ruddy Jarfox and Villa Show. And it was obvious, of course, that the ministers would accentuate the positives in the budget. The minister's own words were that the public will be astounded by all the good news. And certainly, I mean, there was good news for certain people, and they were astounded by how well they did. And they were businesses and investors. And I do think the farming community has done well out of this particular budget. So it would appear that those who have more certainly got more in this budget. And then there were those who were astounded by how badly they had done. And they were sections of the older community. They were young people. They were lone and separated parents. And further stresses on those who are most in need of protection. And because of my own particular interest in people with disabilities, mental and physical, I noted what the Disability Federation of Ireland, that they did acknowledge the positives, but they were pointed out that the plans for social inclusion have been weakened. And as part of the Oireachtas group here on mental health, we made our own submission. And I noted in the budget, in the bill, that there is a 20 million commitment for mental health. But I just wonder its relationship with the 35 previous millions and what weren't spent out of those. So, I mean, those with physical and mental issues, they're still waiting to see what further cuts are going to come down to them when it comes to the health budget. Because already with the social protection budget, some of them are affected by the loss of the telephone allowance, particularly those who depend on the telephone connection for their internet. So the question has to be, you know, how do the measures in this budget and the finance bill, how are they contributed to those people and how their ability to live their lives independently and with dignity? And I'd like to make a general point that it would be an amazing budget and financial bill if it's those people, you know, people who are on low income, people with disabilities, and those organisations who are most involved with those people, like Social Justice Ireland, like the Vincent de Paul Society, if they would come out and be saying, well, that was a fair budget and that was a budget that was proportionate. But we do know that they don't tend to be proportionate, and they don't follow a principle of those most able to absorb the cuts should be the ones who are most effective. And equally, all the calls for equality proofing of budgets and social impact analysis continue to be ignored. And of course, at the heart of all our recent finance bills and budgets is debt. And it's obvious that Ireland is paying the highest cost of the banking crisis. Now, nobody would deny paying lawful debt, but it's the unlawful debt that's crippling sections of the country. Those sections are living on austerity for the benefit of the financial markets. I have no background in economics, but one thing I do know is that we have more debt than we can pay or can be expected to pay. And the Minister in his own speech included a point saying that excluding the interest burden, we are paying our own way again. So we can only imagine what could happen if we didn't have the burden of paying that exorbitant interest. The budget deficit has fallen, but it's still the highest in the EU. And my question also for the Minister is, how can we have real recovery and be expected to grow significantly economically with the extent of those payments? One aspect that has caused an awful lot of difficulty is in relation to the one family parent tax credit. And almost immediately that was seen in the budget, the one family organisation who were most involved with these people, they made their concerns known. They saw the removal as a retrograde step, because the credit had facilitated the collaborative approach of parents who had separated but who had shared responsibility for their children. And the calls and the emails have been extensive in highlighting the impact of this cut on people and on families who are already coping with the stress of marriage or relationship breakdown. It's the single biggest income cut to separated fathers who do want to take responsibility for their children while not living in the same house. I think there are implications also in relation to the Equal Status Act. I think we need to look at the way in which parents are designated due to the many changes in society. The move to the principle of shared responsibility, that both parents are joint carers instead of the term primary carer. And I don't think it's fair that some parents who are not willing to support their children and who avail of the tax credit in the wrong way, that they're the reason why so many fathers are being discriminated against. Now, I know the Minister has said that he's going to look at this again, because this loss of income could have serious effects on the relationship between children and the non-resident parent. One family point out that, you know, this is probably an unintended consequence of what came out here in the budget. But, you know, I don't think this could be justified when everybody knows separation costs money. And money issues if this went through, will create even further issues for people if maintenance can't be paid. Their suggestion is that in order to avail of the tax credit, that a child and parenting agreement must be in place between parents, a written agreement between them on the amount of child maintenance to be paid after separation, and also an agreed plan in relation to parenting issues. One family are willing to engage on this proposal, and I do hope the Minister takes them up on that, their shared child support credit, that the tax credit can be targeted specifically towards families who are in shared parenting arrangements and where child maintenance is being paid. Again, it is a loss of $1,600 to $2,500 a year to parents. The replacement, this single-person child carer tax credit, will be problematic. For example, if the woman is the primary carer and not working, she won't get it, and the father won't get it because he's not the primary carer. So everybody loses in that situation. One other point in relation to lone parents and the impact on them. And we know the surveys on living conditions that these households are the most deprived people, and they are the households that have the least amount of disposable income. And we look at the statistics, for example, for Dublin, over 52,000 lone parent households, but Dublin City has by far the biggest number. And I have to look at budgets and financial bills, and I see very little that's actually going to improve their lives. We're told the economy is growing. This percentage and that statistic are going in the right direction, but that's not filtering down to make a positive difference in the lives of quite a significant number of people in our society. And I think that's the disconnect between the theory and the reality. Looking at foreign direct investment, we know that Ireland has a lot to offer besides the 12.5% corporate tax. But there are massive taxation issues relating to multinational companies. Companies who avail of the tax loopholes and the tax havens to avoid paying their just taxes. There are massive profits that these multinationals have earned, which is not reflected in the amount of corporate tax that's paid here. The effective tax rate is much lower, and these sacred cows should be made to contribute to the economy. We've seen billions leaving the developing countries, and it was aided in some cases by corrupt governments, but also aided by the fact that certain governments in developing countries don't have the capacity when it comes to negotiating. And I want to acknowledge the work that Irish Aid and this government are doing on that. The Minister said that Ireland wants to be part of the solution to the global tax challenge, not part of the problem, because we were part of the problem. And my question is, how much have we lost because the full 12.5% corporate tax wasn't collected? We need to be far more transparent on corporate tax and ensure full collection. I note there's a levy on the domestic banks, but why are we not looking at a financial transaction tax, which I think could make a massive difference? The Living City initiative, I think that's very welcome, and particularly welcome that Dublin has now been included, because there were people in certain parts of Dublin, certainly in the north side, who are concerned that they hadn't been included originally, and I know that there were reasons for that because I did discuss it with the Minister. And my plea is that we do remember that the north side of the city has a very strong cultural and historic tradition, and I hope that is recognised in the Living City initiative. I know there will be people who will be looking for that. It's disappointing over the fact that people were encouraged to save here, and they did their best to save, and presumably part of the savings was that they wouldn't be an additional burden on the state when they get older. And now the fact that they're being penalised for that the government is clipping away at the savings, so there won't be an incentive therefore to save there. I've spoken before here about the massive housing crisis that we do see in Dublin, particularly in Dublin, and I know in other parts of the country, and I'll be looking to see the practical implications and the difference that the suggestions and the plans in the budget and financial bill will make. At the end of Minister Noonan's speech, he says that Ireland will have left the EU IMF programme and Ireland will be handed back her purse. And obviously that is positive. But that can't be seen, I believe, as an end in itself. It has to be a process to something that's going to be much better. And I do hope that what's much better will be more equitable budgets. Thank you.
Thank you, David.